Hello and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Allysia, your host, and today I'm in a different location than I was before, so I'm just kind of like jumping around the room, trying different areas of the room, see what new area that I want to hang out in. You don't need to know all of that. Anyways, we're going to talk about Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, posthumous B49. So what that just means is it's a nocturne that was published when he was dead. We're going to listen through some music examples. I'll talk about things that I find interesting about the piece without getting too music jargony on you. So if you're not like hip with all the music terms, you should still be able to follow this video. I mean, I think so, but sometimes I can get music jargony without even realizing it, but I'll do my best. Chopin wrote 21 nocturnes in his lifetime between 1827 and 1846. To this day, his nocturnes are considered some of the finest of all piano music that exists of all time. We've also talked about another nocturne on this channel before, its most famous one, Opus 9, number 2, I believe. So check that out if you enjoyed this video and if you want to get more into Chopin's nocturnes. But without further ado, let's get started. Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor is a short piece. It's 3.5-ish minutes long, which I guess by today's pop standards is fairly average, but back in the classical and romantic heyday, pieces tended to be quite a bit bigger, so this is considered a musical short. This particular nocturne was written in 1830, but it wasn't published until 1870, which was 26 years after Chopin's death. Now, it's sometimes referred to by its tempo marking, which is lento con gran espressione, or just nocturne in C-sharp minor, because I don't know if he actually has any other C-sharp minor nocturnes, but if he does, this one's more well-known. He dedicated this piece to his sister Ludwika, saying, "To my sister Ludwika as an exercise before beginning the study of my second concerto." Good call on Chopin's part to make an exercise for that concerto, because it is extremely difficult. Like all concertos, I guess. As far as the challenge of this goes in the level, this nocturne is one of Chopin's most accessible pieces. It's not his easiest. There are a few preludes and things that are easier than this one, but it's about an RCM grade 9 level, and I believe it's an ABRSM grade 7 piece. Henley puts it at 5, which is slightly above intermediate by Henley standards, but I find that Henley standards, which go from 1 to 9, are quite hard. Like pieces at a grade, like a level 5 and 6 in Henley are like pretty tough pieces. We'll talk about this as we go too, but one of the big challenges of this piece is keeping the introduction with the chords really, really tight without sounding clunky and heavy, and having those left-hand runs and chord patterns sound effortless. One reason that many people are familiar with this nocturne, and you might have heard it from this too, is that it's in the movie The Pianist twice, at the beginning and at the end, both incomplete. And it's not in that movie just for fun. There's actually like a Holocaust story about it. The Holocaust survivor Natalia Karp famously played this piece for a Nazi concentration camp officer, and he was moved enough by the performance to spare her life. This nocturne is written in common time, but it features a lot of Chopin-esque tempo benders, like expressive triplets and like little trills, like you'll see here's a triplet over here, and just other features like that. Nocturnes in general are really expressive and melodically driven, and they usually have a bit more of like a moody, I'm trying to think of another word aside from moody character, but yeah, they're usually a little bit more introspective. The form here is in ternary form, which is just 3-part form, ABA. It's really simple and straightforward. It basically just means that there's a main part, A, a contrasting section, B, and then a return to the main part. The introduction to this nocturne is just 4 bars long, and it feels really formal and final compared to the rest of the piece. It's all chords played with light and specific pedal. Now the chords sound really resolute and pretty sad, and they take a little bit of care to play in a way where everything sounds simultaneously, so you get all the notes of the chord pressing at the same time without sounding heavy-handed. Now we basically have 2 identical phrases, so you have 2 bars and then another 2 bars, and they're the same, with the second one serving as like an echo, which you would play even more quietly. And again, pianistically, this intro is a lot tougher than it appears. When you're switching chords, you need to keep the top note of the chord smoothly moving to the next note, which is easy if you're just doing like one melody line, but it's difficult when your melody is embedded with chords. And then since it's so quiet, it takes work to make sure you're pressing down all the notes of the chord and they're all sounding simultaneously. It's very, very difficult. One thing less advanced pianists want to do with this is rely on the pedal to create a smooth sounding melody, but you're not going to be one of those. You're not going to make that rookie mistake, right? If you're learning this piece. Anyway, after the intro, we have a beautiful melody that enters. There's no more trace of solid chords, so let's take a quick listen. The intro is much shorter than the time I've taken to talk about it. The main theme of this piece, which occurs twice, the second time after a brief little intermission in like our B section, features a beautiful melody over this backdrop of broken chords. These are wide broken chords, often spanning a distance of a tenth, which is a pretty big leap. It just requires, you don't need to have giant fingers to do it. You just need to be able to have a fluid wrist that rotates nicely. The tempo marking at the beginning, I guess it's not here, but it was on the introduction, is lento con gran espressione, which means slow with great expression. I can pronounce the English better than the Italian. One thing to keep in mind if you're learning this piece is not to go wild with the rubato. Rubato is rubber band tempo, and I find it's often abused in Chopin's compositions, but Chopin himself preferred to keep the left hand, which in this case is like the orchestra, relatively steady while having more tempo flexibility in the melody, which is usually the right hand. It's no easy feat to do that. But that being said, a great effect is made when the lowest bass notes are held ever so slightly longer, like a tenuto, just like a teeny tiny pinch. It's easy to go overboard with this, but instead of ba da 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 ba da da da, sorry, I'm not trying to actually sing that. Instead of like a straight metronome with all four of those notes, you would have like ba da 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 ba da da da. It's just a pinch longer on that low note. Immediately following the main theme is a repeat, except it's not like a direct, exact repeat. The melody moves more, it's got a little bit more action, and then there's this like glorious waterfall of notes midway through that's really difficult to get sounding natural on the piano, since the rhythm is different from the left-hand rhythm. And there's also some more discordant chord choices going on, which makes this part grow in storminess. Now we're going to have a look at the B section. This is the contrasting section in the piece. This is interesting. Since Chopin was writing this piece as an exercise, yes, an exercise, it's not an easy piece, but it's an exercise for his second concerto, which is much more difficult, so you can kind of see how it would be an exercise. There's a little bit of a tie-in to the second concerto, though. These two bars that I have up on the screen, I believe this one and this one, 21 and 22, resemble the main theme from the concerto, from the third movement, and I have that over here. And then the next two bars, 23 and 24, resemble the second part of the second theme. In the first movements of that concerto, I felt like that was a lot of like numbers in one sentence. Basically, the least you need to know is that there's some musical tie-ins between this nocturne and his piano concerto. There's one more tie-in too. So on bar 33, we get a resemblance to the scherzando of the third movement in that concerto. Just a little bit of like you can kind of see that triplet rhythm, ba-da-da-da-da-da. You kind of da-da-da-da-da. You get some similarities going there too. After the B section, Chopin takes us back around to the main theme, which is recognizable just with some slight variations. Now, I love how he holds back throughout this entire piece. You never get this big, satisfying climactic moment in this nocturne, but you have these gorgeous descending trills that never reach a full forte, which is just a lesson that, like, sometimes even though that climactic moment in music would be really satisfying, it's more musically interesting to hold back. Less is more. And then you have the ending of the piece, which I considered to be the most difficult. You have to keep the left hand steady while the right hand is just doing these crazy scale figures in polyrhythm. Basically, it just means that the right hand and the left hand don't actually match up rhythmically that much. You have we have triplets, sometimes quadruplets, etc. No, in this one we have like 18 notes in a row, and even more fun, 35 notes in a row. To get this run, it almost sounds like a glissando going up the piano, but you have to play it like a scale. So to get that sounding effortlessly instead of like your fingers are really working, it takes a lot of work, but the effect is magical. Now, I learned this one a while ago, and when I learned how to play it, what I did is I drew lines in the music connecting the left-hand note to a corresponding right-hand note. Now, I didn't do that visually. I used my ear to decide which note should match up, and it took a lot of trial and error. I probably spent like just a couple hours alone getting the hang of that part. But I'd be interested to see if it would be easier now that it's been so many years since I learned it. But just a little tip if this is a piece that you're learning. And that is pretty much all for today's video. If you're wanting to listen to some recordings of this, there's no shortage. There's like a million people who have recorded this. I really do like Claudio Arrow's version, but like that's not the only one. So go out and explore different versions on Spotify or whatever music streaming service, iTunes or whatever that you happen to use. Enjoy it. And if you want to check out more about Chopin, we've done a history about Chopin. We've done some of his most famous pieces. We've talked about his preludes. We've done a lot of Chopin videos on this channel, so you can check those out. The blog post where all of this information is put at is linked in the description bar, pianotv.net, so you can check that out if you like. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. This particular Sorry, are we good, Lens? We good?